Welcome back to another episode of Spiritual Teachers Podcast. With me today is one of my friends for several years now. We met in San Diego. His name is Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a former U.S. Marine entrepreneur who turned mentor and coach, who supports people utilizing somatic therapy, nervous system work, and mindset coaching. Jeremiah, it's an honor to have you on. Welcome on, brother.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I know you've had quite a journey and I know it's been really interesting. So, I'd love to hear how it all started for you. How did the awakening, what sparked the awakening? What kind of started it all for you?
Yeah. There was a period back in 2016. I was traveling around Europe, and prior to that, I was about 30. I was 30 years old at the time, and prior to that, I had no concept of what consciousness was, or awakening, or trauma. That none of that language is in my field. I never had conversations like that, and never did any meditating. I was just very lost, you could say, in the world, very lost in my mind. And I remember I was listening to this book called Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Many people have probably heard.
Mhm.
And I was at a lake in Interlaken, Switzerland. And I remember listening to that book, and for the first time, I was able to really see my thoughts and like separate my sense of self from just being lost in thought all the time. And in that moment, I remember in that book just disidentifying, like no, seeing that I'm not this person that has obsessive compulsive disorder or ADHD or all of these past pains from childhood and my time in the Marines. And it just felt like this huge weight of anxiety and shame and feeling unworthy kind of just dropped out and fell away for a moment. And that gave me some purchase. It gave me more space in my psyche to see, like, whoa, there's another possibility for living here. And shortly after that, I'd say about a few weeks after that, I got invited to this course called Landmark the Forum, which a bunch of people have probably heard of. And I went in London in the summer of 2016, and that just kept blowing me open. I started to see all these things about my mind and the way that I had been living and all of the pain and trauma that I was carrying. And it really cracked me open. And shortly after that, 2 months after that, I ended up flying to move back to Dubai and built this multi-million-dollar venture like out of my thin air. And the journey just started to open up. I started to see more and more of my unresolved traumas and how things would come out in relationships. I was just becoming more aware of what was already underneath. Yet it took me some time till I actually faced dealing with it and stopped just using the insights to go get rich quick. I had to start like actually facing it. So that was the initial thread. It was just really, I'd just say, a chance encounter. And to give it a little bit more backstory, and that all happened from a Facebook post. I remember it was around like May of 2016. I was in grad school at New York University. And I remember a guy I knew had made a Facebook post saying, "Hey, what are two books or what are the top books that changed your life?" And the two most common books on that post were Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, which I read right before Power of Now, and then Power of Now. And they both had this cascade effect. So
Mm,
it all really came from a Facebook post. And then
wow.
that was the thread that just unraveled it for the next decade.
Well, I have a question. So, yeah, that those two books are super powerful for anybody that hasn't read it, for anybody that's starting their awakening. The Power of Now is a was a huge one for me too. Eckhart Tolle has several books that are really potent.
Yep.
And what was the other one you mentioned?
Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Okay, I haven't
And
read
then
that one, but I know a lot of people have shared that that one's really
yeah,
powerful. And
he's an incredible teacher. He's been on Oprah several times. Like he's just very good at just making it super accessible for people, no matter where they're at on their journey.
yeah, amazing, man. So I'm really curious about the for people that haven't heard of Landmark. How did you find it, and what was? Can you talk a little bit about the experiences you had when you were there? Like,
Yeah.
what was the structure like? What did they break you up into groups? Like, was it like those kind of things?
Yeah. So right after I had that experience in Switzerland listening to this book, there was a guy, a friend of mine named Nadav, and we had been friends on Facebook for, I don't know, maybe 4 years at that point, never met in person. And he saw that I was bouncing around Europe and I was in a really open space after listening to these books. And I was more open, like really open to meeting people and just living in possibility,
Hmm.
just saying yes to things and being spontaneous. So I end up going, getting on Facebook, and he says, "Hey, I've got a space in Berlin. I got an extra room if you want to come stay." And I was like, "That sounds amazing." So I went over to Berlin, and as I'm there, this guy's way of being was very unique. I'd never experienced someone's way of being like this in the world. It was
Mm,
just someone that was really like being themselves, just had just a unique perspective on life and how he operated. And I had been all over the world at that point. I don't know, maybe 40 countries at that point. So I'd seen a lot and done a lot. And there was just something very unique about him. And so one day while I'm sitting there in this apartment in Berlin, I overhear him and our mutual friend Josh in the other room, and they were talking about this course. And I decided to walk out of my room and I go engage in the conversation. I said, "Hey, what course is this you guys are talking about?" And they say, "Hey, it's Landmark." And they were talking about how it altered their relationships with others and their businesses. And it just really clicked for me because I'm like, well, this guy, whatever he's doing, it's like there's something there. I'm curious.
hmm.
Keep in mind, like, I just opened myself to this world of bettering myself through listening to these books. And so I'm just like, my natural, innate character is like, go all in on things.
Right.
So I go in the other room and I start looking up Landmark and I start reading about it. And some people are saying it's a cult. And I got like really turned off, growing up in a strict Christian religious home and then also being in the Marines, I was like really cautious. But
Hmm.
I read this person who wrote a post and they said, they were very skeptical about it. And they were very cautious going into it. Yet when they got through it, they saw that cults try to take you away from society, and Landmark was all about teaching you how to be better with people, and that just did it for me.
Mm,
And so I literally bought a ticket that night, and the next day I left Berlin and I went to London to do it. And
wow.
while I was there, it was 13 hours a day, 3 days in a row, like very intense
Wow.
and very confronting to who I thought I was and my thoughts and very disruptive. And it had me look at the life that I'd been living and the way that I interacted with people, things that I'd done to people, the ways I viewed them, my blaming, my wrong making, the places where I wasn't being responsible. And and it was all done through this very challenging transformational dialogue that they would create. And people would get coached in front of the whole room, like of around 150 of us, and I would just see these people like awaken and break through things. And just by watching that happen, it was transforming me and it was helping me get over things. And I was calling people in my life and having powerful conversations. And on the third day, though, I walked out because it was just so much. It was so much for my ego and who I thought I was to really come up against.
Hmm.
Yet the seed was planted. I mean, there were just things that I heard and saw in there, and just this whole thing of like fear of failure, fear of looking bad. I got over, and it was 2 months after that that I went and birthed this business in Dubai. That was a huge success, and that stemmed from these things that I broke through in that. And so yeah, that was a thread. It's a very they're probably the longest standing personal development company in the world, one of them. Most
Mm,
of the personal development world development, sorry, most of the personal development work that you see in the world stems from Landmark and the founder Werner Erhard, who they consider like the godfather of personal development. Um,
Mm,
Most of the stuff you see in the world stems back from that in the personal development world. So it was really cool to start there. And then, later I end up working with several mentors who led that work around the world and they poured their life into me. So I have a huge gratitude and honoring of that work. I believe it's absolutely paramount for human beings
hmm.
um, in a lot of ways, and learning language and how language creates our world and affects our reality and our relationship. So yeah, that's my beginning stages with Landmark.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know a lot of people that have had profound experiences with that, and it seems as though it's kind of a bridge for a lot
Yeah,
of people in the beginning stages, kind of like slowly easing into into the journey,
yeah.
So so you went to Dubai, you started this really profound business with Pokey, right? And what happened after that?
Well, when I was there, um, I was literally only on the path for like it was like 3 months after my awakening, and thought I had made it. I thought I knew. I'm like, oh, I got it. I got the codes now.
Right.
And I just used all of that to just go chase money and just greed. And during that process, I something great was really birthed. It was a major success. Yet I blew up my business partnership because all of my unresolved traumas were still there, and they started showing up in these contexts. They'd already shown up in the past, but now was the time like I could see. Wait a second, I'm the common denominator here. I'm
Mm,
the one that keeps doing this around the world, and I end up getting into this big legal battle with my partners, and I stepped down as managing director, and I end up selling my portion of the business a year in, and then I went on and I did another business venture in the U.S. and I repeated some of the same patterns again. And I eventually sold my equity in that multi-million dollar venture, reinvested, and then I went bankrupt the next time. My
mm,
greed and my fear and all this stuff finally caught up in a really hard way. And that started to wake me up more. I started to see the deeper unresolved trauma that was still there, and that no amount of money, no amount of achievement, no amount of just chasing personal development courses was going to get at that. Like that I was going to have to sit down in a structured way and start to face my traumas and addictions and my past. So, yeah, but business, I say, has been, still is one of my greatest spiritual teachers. It's the training grounds, that exposes how one relates to money and power and control and people.
hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, business is where I've cut my teeth a lot early on, and yeah.
Okay. Okay. Beautiful. So, I know you've had many mentors and different spiritual teachers along the way, right? When did they start coming into the picture?
Yeah, it was around 2019. I was building that restaurant business in Kansas City, and I knew that I wanted to bring transformation like landmark style. I wanted to infiltrate that. I wanted to immerse my company culture in that to really contribute to people's lives. Yet at the time, I didn't see it so clear. There was the impurity of I was doing it so I could get rich quick.
Hmm.
And so there was part heart, but there was more that, oh, I'm going to do this so that I can feed my ego.
Hmm.
And there was a mentor that I had worked with at that time in Kansas City, and I was telling him like, "Hey, I'm looking for someone at this level." And he had known of a guy who was a landmark leader and trained the trainers, coached the founder of Lululemon and other big companies. And he introduced me to him, and I met this man down in Santa Marta, Colombia, in February of 2019. I was down there working with the indigenous tribes, the Kogi, and him and I bonded, and he ended up becoming a mentor, like father figure to me over the next like 5.5 years after that, until last year, until we completed the relationship. And Yeah, it was a massive turning point in my life. There was someone who came in and really woke me up, pointed out all of my attachments and all of my inauthentic ways of being, and really had to see all these conditioned ways that I was chasing money and status and false relationships and all these things and the pain that it was causing me. And yeah, and that person was a rock and a pillar and was stable and reliable, and poured his life into me freely for years. Someone who used to charge like $40,000 a day for coaching and consulting, gave his life to me for 5.5 years, and it really woke me up and taught me how to trust in others and to trust in life again, and really taught me, just how to get my life into alignment so that I could support so many other people. So yeah, that was my first real one. And then another mentor who's still in my life is a woman named Judith Johnson. She is a 83-year-old pioneer, 83, 84 now, pioneer in the world of somatic therapy. She's been
Oh,
in
wow.
somatic therapy for over 50 years. Friend of Dr. Peter Levine, who created somatic experiencing. She supported him, getting his work off in the world. And she, her over the past few years has poured her life into me and my business partner, is now a colleague, and was a huge pivot point in my life in 2022, meeting her and supporting me, actually knowing what it was to create safety in my body and to clear the deepest levels of trauma that nothing else in the world could clear. And so we bring a lot of her work now into our community-based program. So been really blessed to have these elders who came into my life and poured into me and still there with me, that have now allowed me to support so many other people at a high level.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. They both sound like super powerful beings, and it's amazing that um the gentleman you first mentioned took you under his wing for 5.5 years. That's a long time. So
Yeah.
that's really amazing. And I had a question about him in particular. You mentioned the Kogis and the native people of Colombia and the Sierra Nevadas. I've done some work with them, and the spiritual leaders in those communities are called mamos,
Almost.
and there's three tribes that live in the Sierra Nevadas. They're all kind of one big tribe, but they live at different elevations, so they wear different hats, and but they
Yeah.
all are kind of they all know each other. So, um, what did you get to work with them at all when you first went to meet him?
So I was down there for nine or 10 days in February of 2019, and he was in the middle of, he was being like a liaison, doing communication between them and the government as they were working to reclaim land.
Hmm.
And so, I got to sit in some of those conversations and go around the land with some of the mamos and people and do blessings and offerings and really just connected to it through osmosis,
Hmm.
uh, and getting to meet them and be with them and sit with them. The extent of that was for about 9 or 10 days.
Hmm.
I mean, it's been six and a half years ago almost already. So
Yeah, man. Those people in particular are the most connected people to the earth that I've met so
yeah.
far.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that was. I mean, I don't think my work with them is done yet, but they're amazing. I plan on going to Aniwa this year. Do you
Where
know
is
what
that?
Aniwa is?
Huh.
Aniwa is a gathering where 40 elders from different tribes come together from around the world,
Okay.
and come this year. It's going to be in Mendocino County in the Redwoods.
Okay.
It's the last weekend of May, so in like a month and a half.
Okay.
So they'll be there, and they've been coming for the last couple of years. But I've always had Vision Quest at the same time,
Okay.
and this year it'll be the weekend before. So I'm hoping that that all aligns, and I get to partake in that. So yeah, it's a really from my friends that are part of it and that are guardians and things like that have shared with me. It's a really profound experience to sit with these different elders and connect with them, and some of them pour medicine and share their ways, and it's really beautiful. So if it's a line for you, brother, it'd be awesome to meet up there.
Yeah, that sounds enriching, bringing all of these different leaders from different cultures and tribes together. And yeah, I'm sure that's a super enriching experience.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then with the second mentor you mentioned somatic therapy, right?
Yep.
So, for those that don't know what that is, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'll just give it as a little story. I saw that there was so much that I could do in the mind. There's so much that I could understand here intellectually. And then when I met Judith, she helped me see through lived experience and working with me that trauma at its deepest level lives down in the nervous system and it lives in the somatic body. And so they're both important. They're both absolutely necessary to look at our beliefs, dig into our subconscious, both at an intellectual level, let's say, at the mind, but also that the body is keeping score. Some people might have heard this book. And so somatics is really about the sensations and the nervous system. And this, like if you follow sensations in the body and track them over time, they will lead to where there's unresolved trauma in the nervous system.
Hmm.
And so my first 5 minutes when I was with Judith in her home, she's an elderly woman in a wheelchair. I'm sitting on her couch, and I'll just give an example of what it looks like. I'm sitting there, my eyes are closed, and she's having me name out the sensations in my body. So I could be like, there's a tightness in my chest, there's a pinching in my neck, there's this, and then all of a sudden, she sees my legs clenching, like squeeze,
Mm.
and I'm 5 minutes in, and she goes, "Honey, right there, what does that remind you of?" And I said to her, well, 4 years prior to that, I started to finally become aware of my body during some breath work. And I would notice that while I was sitting down working at a computer, my legs could be squeezing and tensing and tightening, but I didn't know what it was about. She says, "No, what is it? What's the earliest memory that you could see that it brings you back to?" And I said, really quickly, it just came. It's like, oh, that's when I used to throw myself to the ground at home to protect myself from getting physically beaten. All of a
Mm.
sudden, I started like weeping and convulsing and crying for like 30 minutes on her couch. And that trauma that was stored in my body started to release. And so, why is that important? Because, so I want people to get is like somatics are sensations. Let's say it's a somatic as a sensation in the body, warmness, tightness, pinching. There's all sorts of sensations which are distinct from feelings. And so what she was doing is helping guide me and track me as these sensations and following them until well they will intuitively lead to where there's often stuck trauma in the body and the nervous system.
Hmm.
And so when that came, and what it's doing is it's bypassing the conscious mind because I'm in my body out of the conscious mind. It can feel safe. It's not in the way, trying to protect and get out. This old memories were able to surface through my body and releasing that. Why is that profound? Because what I didn't see at that prior to that point is that when my body was tensing like that, what it was doing is it was reacting to something in the environment, which could have been just a thought I have about being stressed out about work or a fear of something or an email that I read, or maybe I hear someone yelling or an argument. And what's going on in those moments where my legs was tensing and tightening is that my body is signaling that I'm in this fight or flight, that there's some sort of threat. And when that's happening, then I'm not actually present. I'm not there to be able to rest and digest. And so it showed me as like, oh my God, I've been doing that for decades. Like that's been
Mm.
going on unconsciously. And
Hmm.
all those times, I'm not fully present because my system is in a fight or flight. And so when I saw that, it was absolutely profound. And to this day, I've never squeezed my legs like that. I end up going through maybe 30 to 40 rounds with Judith. I've lived
Mm.
in her home with her for periods of time. And the more and more I was able to release that stuff from my body, it just became more relaxed and peaceful and non-reactive. I could really be in intimacy with people. I can be fully present here with them. I can hear things and digest things so much quicker. And so that's somatics at an intro here and why it's important, right? Because we've all had things happen to us. We've all gone through levels of trauma and horror and all sorts of varying degrees of stuff. And the body will remember what the mind forgets. And if the
Hmm.
body's holding on to that, then we are going to be prone to being activated, triggered, reactive, and we're thinking that it's what's going on out here, yet it's all just messengers from our past. And so it doesn't matter how much you know up here, how many courses, podcasts, psychedelic ceremony, whatever you've done,
Hmm.
you can go back into your environment. And if your nervous system has not cleared that stuff and processed and felt, then this stuff out here will trip you up and the nervous system will win every time. It will override everything you think you know.
Hmm.
And so that's somatics. That was my awakening into it.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautifully explained, and thanks for sharing your experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really powerful. So, did she ever talk about myofascia and how that's intertwined with somatics?
No, we didn't get into fascial work. I'm very familiar. There's different types of like Rolfing and Heller work and other, but she's more focused deep into the nervous system, somatics, that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Vagus nerve. We do a
okay.
lot of like do hands-on body stuff as well.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah.
So, I'm curious. So when you said she had you squeeze your legs 30 times, was that
No,
that
no,
same
no.
day?
No. So my legs were just squeezing on their own as I'm
Oh,
going through
okay.
the process.
Okay.
She could see my body just naturally doing that as I was being guided through this process. So
Okay.
she was just witnessing tension in my body. My body was just squeezing and locking.
Okay.
And so what was going on is this suppressed memory was arising, and my
Hmm.
body was reacting to that old trauma as I got down and down and down.
Okay.
It was an opportunity to release. And then what I was saying around 30, so I have ended up going through 30 to 40 sessions with her over
Okay.
time.
Got it.
And I've had over 200 people in my life that I've sent to work with her who,
Mm,
all had profound experiences. So that work is a part of our community. My business partner, Jacob, is the one that mainly facilitates that. I will do it at times, but that's his area that we bring into our communities to work with people.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super powerful work, man. I really applaud you guys for doing that. And yeah, it seems as though there's parts of there's the mind, the body, and the spirit. And in order for these deeper levels of consciousness and awareness to come online, the body needs to really be addressed. And there's so many ways to do it. But somatic therapy is a really powerful one. I know you
Yeah.
worked with some other modalities too, like I think you mentioned NET to me, right?
NET. No, not NET.
There was another three-letter one I think you mentioned to me one time when we were chatting.
Um, I'd have to figure it out.
It was something it was something with somatic and feeling the body, but um yeah, so
EMDR.
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So EMDR was another form of trauma therapy that I'd started in 2020. And
Okay.
then it was in 2022 that I started with somatic therapy. And that has been somatic work is just so far above and beyond in its power. So
Can you talk a little bit about EMDR, like your experience with it?
yeah, I maybe did 10 to 12 sessions and um, I worked with a woman out of San Diego actually, and she would have me do, there's all sorts of ways to do EMDR. She would have me wear headphones. Let me recall. We would start off talking about an event. It would just be like a question, and we'd focus on a theme of my life and um, be able to speak out just the hard things that had happened. And then after just a little bit of point after I've gotten into the experience, she would then put these headphones on me and these sounds would go back and forth. And then also she would have me hold these like vibrating hands, um, vibrating, it would just like pulse back and forth.
Hmm.
And when that was done, we would talk some more for like 30 seconds just to like see what was coming up as I went from the speaking to the auditory and the vibration of the hands, speak a little bit more and back and forth. We just go multiple rounds. And there were oftentimes like incredible emotional release that would come.
Hmm.
And um but it felt less of the body. It felt like it wasn't really linked down to the nervous system, the somatics. It was distinct. And then after that, she would also mix in breath work. So I would get done with that, and then I would get on her table for like 40 minutes to an hour and do deep breathing,
Oh,
and
wow.
just like send it on a rocket ship after that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So do you know if the music or the sounds you were listening to, was that binaural beats or something like putting you in a
I
theta?
can't I can't recall now. It was more like I believe they were just like tones. If I remember, it was just beep, like beep tones. They would pulsate back between the left and right at different frequencies.
Okay.
And then the paddles would vibrate at different times as well.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that's one I
some
haven't tried.
modalities, yeah, and some people or some practitioners, because EMDR stands for like, I think it's eye mobilization or eye movement desensitization, rapidization, or something. I can't remember the exact acronym anymore, but um, some of the practitioners, well, you'll speak or you'll go through experience and they have you track your eyes. And I'm not really good at explaining the science behind this stuff, but there's deep science behind EMDR. It's considered also one of the most effective trauma therapies up there with somatic therapy.
So it sounds like it's a lot of like work with the eyes.
Eyes, sound, vibration mixed in
Hmm.
between talk therapy. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that one I remember when we had met in 2020 and I remember you mentioning that to me and being like, "Man, this was really profound." So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. Uh so then when did your journey take you to different plant medicines?
You know, I started with plant medicines in 2012. I was pretty careless with it back then. And then in 2016, right when I was having that like Eckhart Tolle experience, um, actually I would say no, 2015, I was in Amsterdam and I decided I was gonna go have truffles, like which are like mushrooms,
Hmm.
very similar in experience, and they're legalized in Amsterdam. And so I go to the park and I do it with these Australian guys and I walk back through the city and I'm just walking through the city. And I remember sitting down and just like reflecting and noticing and just watching and observing people from a different lens in life.
Hmm.
And 2016, about 6 months later, I go back again to Amsterdam and I started utilizing truffles again. I just kept getting this draw to go back and do them because I was like, wow, my mind really works in a different way.
Hmm.
And each time I started doing them, I would notice this theme that my brother would come up. And a lot of the
Mm.
pain and the fighting and the arguing and my way versus his way and just stuff in our life, stuff from the fallout of my father's death years prior. And and it went on, and then, after the fallout of that business venture in Dubai, I moved back to the United States to build a business there, get close with family, heal the relationship with my family. But I was going through so much grief and shame for things that had happened in the business venture in Dubai and how I showed up. And I was at the bottom of my road. I, was considering killing myself. And I was like, you know what? I had known about ayahuasca for like 7 years. I used to live in Peru in 2010, so I'd hear people talk about it, but I was like, oh, I'd never do that. But
Right?
here, 7 years later, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. I need something to pull me out of this.
Hmm.
So I go down to Peru and work with the Shipibo tribes, and it was very profound. It was harrowing, terrifying every night. Yet I was able to work through a lot of the physical abuse and things that had happened in childhood, and it was a layer of forgiving my parents in that moment and grieving my dead father who died 7 years prior, grieving him for the first time,
Wow.
and because I just ran away from him. And then over time, I had some more experiences in 2019 with ayahuasca, but for the first until around 2020 and 2021, I wasn't really integrating it. I'd have the peak experience, I'd have some insights, I'd make a little change, but I would just keep resulting back to old behavior patterns
Mm.
until I had a great therapist wake me up and just tell me, she's like, you think you're so self-aware, you're a fucking addict and you've not dealt with your addictions.
Dang, she
She's like,
gave it to you like
she gave it
real.
to me.
Yeah.
She's like, you've just been using all the personal development work and all of the psychedelics as a way to cover up really getting down to the root.
Hmm.
And so that's when I committed into the trauma therapy, EMDR, and I started looking at the 12 steps, and then I found Ibogaine in 2021. I went down to Mexico with doctors and nurses, and I did an Ibogaine treatment with other military veterans to work at the nature of addiction that I had been dealing with. And it was profound. I was awake for like 3 days, and
Whoa.
I, yeah, I felt empathy, like deep empathy for the first time in maybe like 10 years.
Whoa.
Um, and just had profound experience of like feeling the depth and pain of my parents and pain from a lot of the addiction that I'd lived and pain I'd caused others. And it was just, there was a higher level of intention in knowing I was going to integrate. And after that Ibogaine experience, I ended up completing the 12 steps, but
Well,
I
can I
still,
stop you there for a second?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So Ibogaine, let's talk about that in Iboga. So Ibogaine is uh taken from the Iboga.
Yep.
It's a plant, right?
Yep. It's an
And
extract. So ibogaine is one alkaloid, I think, of over 30 alkaloids, which are like medicinal properties,
Mhm.
from the full root, which is Iboga.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So and the root is traditionally grown in Africa.
Yeah. Gabon, Africa is the only place in the world it grows.
Okay. And so there was a shaman down in Mexico that had a center there.
Yeah. So there's actually a gentleman, a doctor, who opened the first center over this maybe now it's been maybe 24 years ago. So he's been way
Oh
ahead of the
wow.
curve.
Wow.
And he worked exclusively down there with first responders, special op military veterans, and supporting people healing. Because like I had traumatic brain injury and these different things, and so yeah, it was down there. It's facilitated, and ibogaine is typically used more so in these clinical type settings for the nature of addiction.
Okay.
It's yeah, it's more controllable in a sense from my understanding of it. So
Then
that was
Iboga.
Ibogaine. Yeah. So Iboga, now I've worked with that twice, both times in Portugal in 2023 and 2024, is the full root. And
Okay.
so there's over 30 medicinal properties or 30 alkaloids versus ibogaine is just ibogaine.
Okay.
And so Iboga's got ibogaine and like, 29 plus more
Right.
that hit all these different properties of the brain. And from what I experienced is that Iboga really has it has the full spirit of the plant. It's like
Okay.
for me, it was a much deeper spiritual healing.
Okay.
And yeah, very, very deep spiritual healing.
Okay.
You do it 2 times. Typically, you do it 2 times over a 8-day period,
Okay.
and was awake for 6 out of 8 days. Just like
Okay. So it's I know Iboga in particular has the longest journey out of any entheogen, and so I didn't know that it keeps you up for that long. I thought it was a 24-hour trip.
yeah, it keeps you up. It keeps you up for that long.
Okay. So
Yeah,
are you
some people can go to bed more, but they call it like a waking dream state.
okay? So
And
you're uh, okay. So waking dream state makes me think of theta. theta state. So you're kind of like in that meditative in between veil and this reality.
Yeah, it's like you can just lay there in bed or sit around and just like the mind is so empty and just
Okay.
awake. Like you barely sleep. It's so activated. It's the whole brain like lit up like a Christmas tree.
Wow.
Yeah, and long. It's Iboga is just, in my experience, and a lot of other people's commonly, is just a lot of direct truth. Here's the truth of your life. Here's the truth of your life. Every time, both in Ibogaine and Iboga, I've had what they refer to as like the life review, where it'll go through every year of my life from childhood till the present moment and everything that I've gone through, all the major trauma impactful events, year by year by year. Here it is. Here's the truth of
Oh,
your life.
wow.
And it's profound. And they're
So it
studying this now.
so there's
They've got
it's literally going like every year of your life, huh?
yeah, they've got there's Stanford. So last year, the government got approved for. Sorry, the U.S. government approved research funding for ibogaine and iboga for
Wow.
the first time in decades,
That's
or the first
amazing.
time ever. Yeah, and so there's doctors out of like I believe Stanford. Tim Ferriss did an interview about this where they find some of the common things on Iboga or Ibogaine is this life review that people have. It's
Mm.
really profound. It's just I love it because it's not all cryptic and visionary like ayahuasca. It's like here's the truth of your life and why things are going the way and why you are the way you are.
Interesting. That's so interesting. So, like, ti I mean, time probably is so irrelevant when you're on the medicine, but
Yeah.
when you're in it, how do you how does it transition to the next year? Like, is there something that gets um like there's a lesson that comes from that experience from the first year of your life, and then it takes you to the next one, or how does it know and how long does it know how much time to take you in each stage of your life?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, the very first time I worked with Ibogaine, it was for me to really look at and feel and process the pain that I'd lived with around 20 some years of addiction and the impact it caused my life and the impact it caused in other people's lives. Now, the second time, it was 2 years later when I worked with Iboga, I had already faced all of that. However, it showed me it again, and um, it showed me it from the lens of when I asked, like, why is this again? And it's God was like, because you're identified with it,
Ah,
because you're still identified with it. And then the third time, so just for context, the reason I continue to work with it because not because I was trying to resolve anything. I continued to work with it because I recognize that Iboga is the most effective thing, as far as I know, that we know in the world for elevating BDNF and GDNF hormones in the brain to like literally heal the brain.
mm,
And I noticed that after each time that I worked with it, that my brain just functioned in ways that had never functioned before. That I just felt more cognitively there, more online. So and yeah, and just to feel my life had only gotten better and better and better. As plus, I knew how to integrate. I was walking in my relationship with God, as living in my purpose, and I'd done all this somatic nervous system work. So I wasn't going back to work with this to try to resolve anything anymore. It was more like I want to continue to tune up my brain and have the physical benefits of it.
okay. Okay. So that's awesome. I didn't know that about the qualities of ibogaine and iboga. So when you're on the medicine, there's there's no you're not it doesn't sound like you're crossing the veil, or are you?
Well, I had this experience the second in my first time with Iboga, where I guess you could say that's probably be the closest thing that you're talking about. Where on the second session, um, I just been awake for so long, and the experience was so deep that there was a point where I actually thought I was physically dead.
Oh, wow.
And I never had that on. And I've worked with a lot of psychedelics. I'd worked with ayahuasca 10 times at that point, LSD, ketamine, you name mushrooms, maybe 50 to 100 times. And at that point, I'd never experienced something like that. Like I really thought I had physically died.
Whoa.
And yeah, and I had this experience of morphing in and out of my dad's dead body and my
Whoa.
ancestors. And it occurred to me that I was a ghost, like I was a spirit just in the spirit realm. And I never had anything like that. That would almost be like woo-woo to me.
Hmm.
And it left me with this deep sense of peace because in that moment I was like, well, I'm died. This is it. It's okay. It's like okay. And for me, I didn't share with the listeners, but I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder at age 6. And I used to lock doors hundreds of times, and wash my hands hundreds of times until they were so dry they would bleed. And all of these rituals were linked to a deep rooted fear of death that I didn't control my environment in just the right way, that I would die. You
Mm.
know, obsessive compulsive disorder is considered one of the top 10 debilitating diseases in the world. And so I had lived with that through a lot of my life in different variations. And there was often a very deep rooted sense of fear of death from early childhood trauma. And so here I am in this Iboga, and I had an experience that second session and that 8 day period on my first round of Iboga where God just cured me of it. There's
Whoa.
no there's no known cure in Western medicine for obsessive compulsive disorder. Yet over the years, through a lot of psychedelics, through drawing closer to God, lots of trauma therapy, all the rituals had fell away, and my behaviors and dysfunction and I'm 3.5 years sober. Things just kept getting better, but Iboga was definitive, and I made the declaration afterwards that I've cured myself of this. God's cured me of this, and it was a profound shift. And I know part of it was both the experience of like feeling God like cut and take that away, because in my world, OCD is like a mind parasite. It's a
Hmm.
deep, deep parasite of the mind from deep, deep fear. And I had that experience, just this mystical experience, and inside of also that feeling like I had died, it left me with a sense of peace around death that I'd never had before. And
Mm.
and I was just like, it was so wild. It was just like unexplained. It was so much for my psyche to take in
Yeah.
and to integrate that for some time. But I knew in that moment that there was such a profound shift that happened in my life, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And when I got out of that, experience, I just remember being in tears for days, just like just rocked. The medicine's so strong that when we got out, we took our last dose on a Monday, and the retreat ended on a Thursday. Well, it was like being in a mushroom trip all the way until Sunday.
Whoa.
That's how strong, like when I mean a strong mushroom trip until Sunday.
Whoa.
So it's very intense, intense medicine.
Wow. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I know a lot of people in the spiritual community, and you're one of the only people that I know that's worked with Iboga. And yeah, it sounds like it's profound. I mean, that so it brings up the question, the ibogaine journey versus the Iboga journey. Are they both breaking it down into the life review?
Yeah, for me, I had had the same experience on both. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And and then it just takes it all the way up to the present moment.
Yeah. And if you have good facilitators, like in the Iboga, they're really, really seasoned people that work with it, at this center in Portugal.
Hmm.
And one of the women would sat behind me and would like walk me as I'm very deep in the experience, would walk me through like visualizations when I was a kid and ask me where I'm at in different parts of my house and what's going on to keep it like going deeper and helping me repattern and process different things is profound.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. And that woman was in Mexico or in Portugal?
it's Portugal.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So for those that want to work with Iboga, it sounds like Portugal is a great spot. I know Costa Rica has a retreat center with a shaman that is from Africa, and I've thought about going there to work with Iboga just to experience it because from my experience, different plant medicines have given me different levels of awarenesses.
Yep.
So, have you worked with sassafras before?
Have not.
Oh man, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite medicines. And that medicine is interesting because it's kind of like what you mentioned with Iboga, where it's not taking you into these psychedelic, really like trips where you're seeing all these colors and things like that. For me, it was just like witnessing the observer observing me of this body.
Hmm.
So it was like being able to see the patterns and the programs from above and being able to catch them in real time. Like, whoa, right there, I am repeating a program right there. And I was
Yeah.
doing it with my previous partner at the time, and I would catch it when she was going into a pattern. I'd be like, whoa, that's a pattern right there. That's been happening for who knows how long, you know?
Yeah.
And gosh, man, like that medicine is it felt it's considered a heart opener and it felt like it
Yeah.
just blasted my heart chakra just and I could just empathy wasn't even it was just everything was empathy, and
Yeah.
so much sensitivity to all the surrounding sounds and energies and yeah, I've done it twice and both times have been really beautiful. So I guess my question is with Iboga and Ibogaine, did you feel like you had any of these um, awarenesses come online or these deeper ways of navigating this reality, the 3D matrix.
Um, well, the Ibogaine and the first time I worked with it in 2021, it was my first experience of experiencing life with no grasping for weeks after,
Mm,
where my brain, I never, they call it like defragging a computer. That's how the analogy they give commonly. It just felt like my mind had been wiped clean
mm,
and there was no like grasping for anything. And feeling that was the very first opening that I was like, wow, this is must be what it's like to not be an addiction. Because I only knew addiction and deep trauma before that, like constantly grabbing substances, seeking, chasing. And so it was profound in the sense of like, wow, that's possible. So that encouraged me to continue to integrate, work the 12 steps. I knew it was possible to get free from all of that because here I am. I've had an experience of it. But before that, I had no reference point.
right.
So um, I finally got fully sober later that year in 2021. I've been sober since 3.5 years, I had 20 some years of deep addiction, multiple addictions. And so that right there is game changer. Everything that's game changer in itself to
Huge.
live a life in sobriety. And now I've helped so many other people as well. And, and just there was a lot of things that God worked through me through that medicine and supporting me really just understand more who is me and what was all of the stuff that I've taken on in my life and just seeing that all get just cleared and seeing for me it's like my brain and how it just felt like it just worked more. It's hard to put into language if until someone's done it. But it's just like literally my brain just works differently,
Hmm.
and I truly believe it is because of how the medicine activates certain hormones in the brain, which are called BDNF and GDNF hormones, to heal and alter brain chemistry. And it just felt like, yeah, I was operating more like like what it's supposed to be like operating. And what I saw with Iboga as well is just how malleable the brain is for those periods after. Just like just how quickly you can create change for like 6 to 9 months after. It just feels like the medicine stays in you a long time. It's not like ayahuasca or mushrooms. Like this stays in you for a long time.
Mm,
Um, and that's a very unique characteristic of it in comparison to others. And so, yeah, it's just each time I just knew it felt like I was getting a huge advantage on life.
hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's what I could say about it.
Was there any fear going into the medicine the first time?
Not really. I look back and I was so excited at that point.
Mm,
I had dealt with a lot of my terror through the ayahuasca days,
right.
and I was terrified every time I did ayahuasca, terrified out of my mind.
Hmm.
And I had just, you know, I remember when I finally got back into therapy in 2020 and was doing the trauma therapy. By the time I started working with Ibogaine, I was like, you know what? I felt like I had dealt with some of that deeper, hard stuff. And I was also just at a point where I was like, you know what? I'm not here to fight medicine anymore. Like I know I finally knew what it was to surrender.
Hmm.
And so
That's
it
huge.
became to where I love it. Like to me, it's like I know how to just get into it and fully let go,
Right.
fully enjoy it versus for years, I used to just fight it. And so my experiences were harrowing,
Hmm.
harrowing.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, man. I'm fascinated by this medicine. It sounds like it can help so many people. Would you recommend it for veterans of military or people that have had deep PTSD in different parts of their life?
Yes, with a caveat, I tell people that, looking back, knowing what I know now, and again, I used to abuse psychedelics. Abusing me, I wasn't integrating, and I wasn't getting down into the deep structured work. And I have had experiences in my life that were in a sober state, no medicine, in somatic experiences where I've had deeper releases by far. And so I really got that it was never about the medicine. The medicine is only a tool,
Right.
and it is a tool, and the tool has to be need to be used properly if
Hmm.
you want it to be effective. And so I saw that as I had done more inner work in a sober state, trauma therapy, nervous system, somatic work, that when I went into those experiences, they were way more profound.
For sure.
Way more profound, way more healing. I was also more conscious to integrate them versus fighting and resisting, and then they can blow out the nervous system more and keep people ungrounded, can send people into hard, harrowing states. I have friends who've gone into psychosis for a couple of years through ayahuasca experiences. These people were not grounded. They were seeking from the wrong places. And so um, I am a proponent and advocate of psychedelics only when used very intentionally. And I encourage people to have done some somatic work or understand how to regulate their nervous system, that they are a little bit more grounded in their body and they're just a little bit into their journey than rather than just going straight to that. Because the other thing is, if you haven't learned regulation or safety, truly intention and coming from these right places and how to relate to these things, I see it time and time again. It becomes a new addiction
Hmm.
because people are trying to seek their sense of safety or salvation in that versus getting that it's a tool, it's not the source. And it's a very slippery slope to get hooked into that. So, yes, I'm a proponent with a major caveat of the things I just said.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. That's really important for people that are listening to understand,
Yeah.
uh, versus understand. But yeah, one question that comes up that I think is a really important question is what you mentioned earlier, where there were times when the integration hadn't happened, and so there was these things that continued on. So can you share what, because integration looks so different for every person. Can you share what integration, when you started seeing the results of the integration and how you felt when the integration was actually happening, and the difference between somebody who just went and did medicine and then just continued their life versus like these different ways that people can integrate.
Yeah, so I'll start by lack of integration. It's just going and having a peak experience or working with medicine or it could be any modality, going to a personal development course, going to a retreat, and people will have these ahas, these insights, these realizations, these epiphanies, breakthroughs, and they'll get hooked by that and they'll chase that. But that actually doesn't fucking mean anything. Doesn't mean
Right,
anything.
right.
The only thing that matters is if you actually take action and your life changes. And so for so many years, I was chasing the peak high in the experience, but I would go back into an environment that didn't support that aha, that realization, the breakthrough actually living on in my life
Hmm.
because I would just cover it up with more work or more sex or more substances or getting back into the same routine, the same day to day, the same relationships. And so there was no integration. I didn't take these things and alter my environment, my relationships, what I'm reading, watching, taking in, the work I'm doing. I didn't alter those things in a way that would support the truth of what I saw.
Okay.
And so then there was a lack of integration. And so my life would just inevitably end up, there'd be little incremental change versus profound shifts.
Hmm.
And so, uh, and sometimes I would just play out same behavior patterns because the underlying energy didn't get transformed. It was only a breakthrough.
Hmm.
And so integration, in my view, I mean, everybody's got their own, is first we have to ask why integrate? You know,
Right.
it's like I had my great mentor, pass this on to me. He's like, and he is a man who coached 250,000 plus people over 40 years. And he led transformational dialogue and supported ayahuasca centers. And he really started to look like, why integrate? In my view, you integrate because so that you can be here to fulfill your calling.
Mm.
Now, why am I doing any of this? Why am I working with psychedelics? Because if it's just about me and the self and mine and what I'm getting from it, what that's a small, selfish, self-indulged context.
Right.
So for me, like integration is I want to first understand why am I doing it? I'm doing it because I want to be a better human being so that I can be at my best for others, so that I can serve life. And so what that looks like to me is that what I'm taking the truth of what I see and I'm going back into my environment in my life and I'm making changes. I'm taking action that will support that truth living on. So one of the truths I saw in I'll give you an example. In Iboga in the first round, I was like, you know what? Okay, addiction has plagued my life. This is how it's impacting people. This is how it's showing up. I know I need to work the 12 steps now. I need to
Hmm.
focus on doing this. So I set up my life. I started to do that.
Hmm.
That's just one example. I found an addiction sponsor. I started working the process.
Hmm.
I continued on healing, working my physical body and detox, these type of things.
Hmm.
Uh, the recent round, I just one thing got revealed. I was like, you know what? It's time to let go of this mentor you've worked with. It's time to close that
Mm.
relationship. And so I was a tough thing. I did it right during right when it was over.
Wow.
And as I could go take action on those things, because otherwise it's just chasing a high. And so the simplest way I could say is like what I tell people is I like to write down all the truths and insights I see. I like to write them all down. And then I like to write out what are my next action steps that I'm going to take
I like
and
that.
what do I?
Hmm.
And I have to keep it in my visual field, like on a whiteboard or in a journal that I'm going to refer to every day. And I want to keep taking action steps based on those truths and how do I what action do I need to take so that that comes alive? And then I make the changes to support that.
Hmm.
And to me, there's nothing else that's important until that's done. I'm not trying to add more shit on top of things. I'm not trying to do this or do more. No, I'm trying to deal with what's there rather than chase more. And
Right.
so for me, that's how I explain integration. Again, with the context, with the intention of I'm integrating so that I can be better for people in life, that I can fulfill a calling, not just to integrate for me,
Right.
not just for some self-indulgent thing.
Right. Yeah, that's a really beautiful approach, and I think for people that aren't ready to be of service yet in the bigger ways, it is serving to heal the self first, because if we start being of service too soon, or just kind of jump in before we've done our own inner work, like you said earlier, those patterns and those traumas are going to just play out with clients and with other relationships that are involved with that, right?
Well, let's define service. So when I'm saying be of service, let's define it this way. It's just simply being there for people in your life.
Mm,
It's just
hmm.
being present. You
Right.
know, it's just getting on when you're with somebody that you're listening and you can have someone be heard and you know how to be present and show up for people. You
Hmm.
know how to quit making it all about you and your fears and shames and the self-absorption. And you learn how to take care of yourself. You're doing this so you could take better care of yourself, the oxygen mask on a plane, so you can support other people. So you can just be there for people. It doesn't
Right.
have to be big. You don't have to go do coaching. You don't have to do that. But that you're just available for life versus just yourself.
Right.
And to me, that's really the only reason to integrate. And
Yeah.
if it's not that, then it's like, why are you doing this? You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah, I
Because it
really
can
like
very
that.
quickly just become more and more about the self. And then you
Right.
get all sorts of inflated senses of ego, narcissistic behaviors, spiritual hierarchy, just all that nonsense.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, that's a really good thing to highlight, is what does service mean, and also why integrate. Those are two really important questions. So so I mean, it sounds like the Boga journey was really hugely transformational, and the integration process was really potent and powerful. What how did the coaching and the other aspects come online after that?
Well, I had seen that I mean, geez, over that time, I just had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in all sorts of modalities and therapists and psychedelic treatments and programs. And I could see that, like, okay, my life is changing. Like, over time, it's like, wow, I've dealt with this. I've faced the darkness of my life after living in like a mental hell for years, obsessive compulsive, and all these unresolved complex traumas from childhood and my time in the Marines. Like, okay. And I would just see that as I was there for people and I showed up and I listened and I offered and I supported people, that it was always so fulfilling. And people would give me these powerful reflections of who I was for their life. And then I also looked like, wow, my mentor, who was just an incredible coach, like, done 30 years, 70,000 plus people, how much he poured into me, how many gifts he poured into my life, that I would share that with people. And it just became this natural evolution. I had been involved in all sorts of sales roles since I was young. I was really just could be out there with people. I could inspire people, get people excited. I'd built businesses. I trained people in fitness all over the world. I just had this, way of connecting and supporting people.
Hmm.
So it was just kind of a natural evolution. But I didn't start really putting myself out there until I was over a year sober at that point, and until I really saw that I had done some of these deeper things and I was living it. I was embodying it.
Hmm.
And then I just started practicing and I just was sharing what I had learned on these journeys to support people where they're at. And then through that, it just became more and more the embodied confidence, and like I've had a lot of different experiences in life, building multi-million dollar businesses, also seeing financial bankruptcy, overcoming complex PTSD, getting out of addiction, like, coaching health and fitness to billionaire families. Like I'd had a lot of different experiences over the decades, and I was like, I wanted to share these with people.
Mm-hmm.
And it evolved over time. I started out doing like uh, prep and integration coaching for psychedelic treatments for
Mm-hmm.
people in um, you know that worked with doctors. I did them for ketamine clinics. And then I started working just one-on-one clients, supporting them in their relationships with their parents and making amends with people in their life. And then I just started opening myself more and more as I got confident to share about the things that I've actually lived and embodied and can help people through. Um, and as that just and then it kept progressing. I was like, I knew that I wanted to get into group development. I had already led large groups in fitness, and I had managed businesses of up to 60 people at a time that I owned. So I already had that natural ability to, bring people together, to lead people. And now
Mm-hmm.
I'm more in my heart, I'm more clear. So I'm like, naturally, I'm going to be a better leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like brought all of this life experience, all the somatic therapy, the deep trauma work, the mindset stuff, the ontology, and put it together in a group development program. And I've been running it a year and a half now. It's continued to just grow exponentially in profound ways. We work exclusively with women now, do a
Amazing.
very intensive program, taking people into everything they've ever experienced in their life, all the grief, all the loss, all of the every single relationship, past, present, dead or alive, where there's resentment, doing full inventories, taking people through the somatics and just watch the impact in these people's lives. It's profound, and it's like I know it's just my life's work, and so it just naturally evolved through the things that I had gone through, I'd clearly lived and embodied, and I just learned to stay in my lane. Only work with people things I'm embodied in, and stay away from things that I don't know or that are theory, and just stay in what I've lived.
Mm. I love that approach, man. I think that's really beautiful. And it's so awesome that you can bring all of your life experience and share it and help people grow and evolve from that. And sounds like you had some really amazing mentors that kind of guided you and showed you
Yeah.
these techniques and ways. And what I've found it in this, I mean, I've done a little bit of coaching and I've found that the questions is where for a lot of people the like people just haven't thought about a specific question, like phrasing a question in a really profound way for that individual can shift so much.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Well, brother, it's been a really amazing conversation, man. I think we covered so much today, and I'm just super honored to have had you on. Thank you for sharing about your journey, about all the medicine and all the somatic experiences and modalities and different things that you experienced. Your journey's really amazing, man. So it's been an honor
Thanks,
to
man.
have you on, and thank you so much for joining, brother.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Love you, man. Until next
You too.
time.